Good day. Welcome to Westchester Talk Radio, westchestertalkradio.com. I'm John Marino. We are produced by Sharc Creative, made possible by Entergy, the Indian Point Energy Center, supporting our communities right through the spring of 2021. Lipolis Electric, don't be left in the dark. Get Lipolis, and by Hightower Westchester. At Hightower, they manage your wealth to a fiduciary standard. And special thanks to our heroes throughout the COVID pandemic over at White Plains Hospital. We thank you one and all. Here we are on the Sports Report, joined by Josh Thompson for a return appearance. Josh is the sports editor at the Journal News, lowhud.com, and the Poughkeepsie Journal. Josh, welcome back. I know it turned out to be, after all, a pretty busy winter sports season, the fall 2 sports season getting underway, high-risk sports that were deemed inappropriate, not healthy enough, I guess, during the fall itself to be played, and now they're about to conduct a fall 2 sports season during springtime in Section 1 and throughout New York State. You cover Section 1, Section 9, Section 1, of course, covering Westchester, Rockland, Putnam, and Southern Dutchess, Section 9, covering Northern Dutchess, Orange, also Sullivan and Ulster counties, too. First of all, how did the winter sports season go, especially, finally, with the allowance, the permittance of high-risk sports like basketball, hockey, and wrestling to finally be played as of the beginning of February?
Well, when you're talking about those sports you just mentioned, wrestling, basketball, hockey, it was fast. It was a really quick season, just a few weeks long. I mean, there were actually teams like Scarsdale Wrestling that was only allowed to compete just the last week of the season. So they just had a couple matches, and it was different. Certainly in wrestling, there were some real matches. There were some matches that were more like scrimmages. There were other matches that were kind of a cross between the two. And, in all cases, the objective was just to get as many athletes to compete as possible. There were even 2 wrestling matches the last week of the winter season that were conducted outdoors, one at Mamaroneck High School and one at Tappan Zee High School. Obviously something we've never seen before. And when you ask how it went, I think it probably depends on what school or what team you played for. There were certainly teams that maxed out. And what I mean by that is basketball teams that played 15 games, 12 games during the regular season, then another 3 postseason games. And then there were teams that only ended up playing a handful of games because they were put on COVID pause and, kind of at inopportune times. And there were some really good teams. Pearl River boys basketball in Rockland County, for example, undefeated, missed the postseason, wasn't able to compete because they had a contact situation with a different team that had a COVID case, late enough in the season where they weren't able to quarantine for 10 days and then come back to action. So those are the type of things that happened, that occurred during the season. And, I think some teams and some schools would tell you it was successful, and other teams and other schools would probably argue, well, what was the point? We only played a couple games. And so I think in this case, it's kind of the in the eye of the beholder.
I had a couple of coaches tell me, as long as we could get 4 or 5 games in, at least I'll be happy with that for the kids, because it's about getting the kids out there somehow, and we don't want to waste all the work we've done, not only this year, but in the previous years with these kids leading up to this. Basketball, for example, the goal of this year could not be the county center, a much different postseason. Austin girls, for example, not having their typical kind of season and postseason. The Mahopac girls taking care of that, obviously, but it was fun to watch and fun to be a part of. I think no doubt about that.
Yeah, I think that everybody felt very fortunate to play. That's kind of the thing that you hear from people over and over again is, we're fortunate to play. And I think that sometimes it's just genuine kind of excitement for having the opportunity after waiting for so long and maybe wondering and wishing, that you'd get an opportunity to play. And I think that there was a point in January and December where people didn't think that would ever happen. So I think there was a lot of gratitude and people were excited to have the opportunity to play. I think sometimes that was a coach or a player kind of trying to remind themselves that they should be fortunate or they should feel glad that they had the chance to play because they were upset about a loss or a bad performance or something. So, I think you have those 2 sides of the coin. But yeah, it was definitely different. I mean, they're playing, you mentioned about the championships, their regional championships in boys and girls basketball was 8 different tournaments each. Hockey was 3 different tournaments. So certainly, by no means were we, crowning sectional champions. But again, it's when you look in comparison to Section 9, which you mentioned before, they only really had about a 2.5 week window to play a regular season because they hadn't played any fall sports back last fall. So they had moved all their sports to the fall. So they wanted to give those kids an opportunity to play starting March 1st. So their season ended 2 weeks before it did in Section 1, and that limited their season to 15 games. Or, it's about the same in hockey. You should feel pretty fortunate.
Mm-hmm. Now, wrestling, I was surprised when they allowed that to begin with. Was it true that in wrestling, obviously, during a match, you can make whatever move you needed to make, touch accordingly, but at the end of a match, you cannot make contact with your opponent?
Well, there's no handshaking in general. So, I was at a Solmers Mayapack football game Saturday night, and the head coach of Solmers, Tony DiMatteo, he played against his son, Dominic DiMatteo, who's the head coach at Mayapack, and his grandson, Anthony DiMatteo, who's the quarterback at Mayapack. And, they kind of made a show of not shaking hands after the game, the teams. And, it was the first time they had played that I can ever remember. And, they're just neighboring towns. And, normally I think there'd be a lot of handshakes and hugs after the game. And outside of Tony DiMatteo hugging his grandson, it was, hands off. And that's just something you don't see during any contest. And so that's just kind of been the way it is. The state education department, they're kind of saying is as little contact as you can possibly have. They don't even really want teammates, hugging and high-fiving. Obviously, that's something that's really difficult to control, in the course of a game, in the course of the action. But, definitely in terms of post-game or post-match handshakes, you're not seeing that this year. I mean, there were athletes, John, who played basketball games on a Saturday, and they played football game the following Friday night. And that's obviously not easy. It's not ideal. But I think, from everybody I've talked to and asked that question to, I haven't heard one complaint. Maybe from a coach who's like, my team is not quite ready. We have a lot of basketball players or whatnot. But in terms of the athletes, I think I don't think they think the way that adults do. I think they look at it as they're healthy enough to play. They're excited to play, and they want to get back out there. The state and the section had allowed basically some practices to carry over from one season to another. And then you were actually allowed, which they never allow, you were actually allowed to attend 2 practices in a day. So if you had a basketball game or a basketball practice, you were able to go to football and at least just be present and then get credit for that practice, which is what allowed some of the athletes to kind of play, the 2 sports within a week, which, you literally would never see that. But that's just the way it is this year. And I think the question is, is that healthy for athletes? Well, I think that it's probably, in this case, it's been decided that the ability to be able to participate after what's been a crazy year is more important than, the potential for an injury. And you can argue that and kind of debate that topic, but, I think that's just kind of going to be the way it is. Just this year, it's a unique year. And so I think that's kind of why the decision makers, came up with that policy.
Josh Thompson is the sports editor at the Journal News, lowhut.com, and the Poughkeepsie Journal. Josh, how have school systems adjusted throughout the school year and throughout the changing sports season from fall to winter and now over to fall to spring still to come? How have athletic departments around Section 1 and athletic directors and coaches themselves been able to adjust? Have they gotten used to doing this?
Yeah, they've been busy. I mean, that's what you keep hearing over and over again, how busy they are and, how crazy it is and how wild it is. I mean, 2 weeks ago, the week where football and volleyball practice had started and there was still a basketball and hockey season going on. And, that was as wild a week as I can remember. I mean, you just don't get that here. You get some overlap, but, the overlap's usually the first of a 3 or 4 week window where teams are practicing to get ready for a season, not where, you're really ramping up to 100 miles an hour to get ready for that next year, where you're still trying to play a playoff game. So it was definitely a tough factor there. I mean, look at Eastchester, their head coach, Fred DiCarlo, and Harrison's head coach, Jay Sirocco. They both coach football. They're also basketball coaches. So Jay Sirocco is a girls basketball coach at Harrison, and Fred DiCarlo is the head boys basketball coach. He had a good team this year at Eastchester, and he's trying to do both in the same day. I saw Jay Sirocco one night. I said, Jay, why are you guys practicing at 7 o'clock till 9? I think it was 7 to 9:15 at night. And he said it's the only time they can practice because he has basketball after school. And, he probably didn't see his family that whole week. So that's just kind of the way things are. But again, it's trying to take advantage of the opportunity as best they can to play. And that's really what this all came down to.
The fall 2 sports season now, football, volleyball, competitive cheer. Do you get the sense, maybe from the kids or even from coaches, that when they look around on the football field right now practicing, they don't feel the autumn chill in the air, even though it's still cold out many days? They don't see falling leaves. They don't see Halloween decorations or Christmas decorations or any turkeys running around for Thanksgiving in anticipation of that. Is there a sense that if this really is something strange we're doing right now?
Yeah, I talked to a Nurse Shell senior, Gary Phillips III. He was one of their, key players last year in the state championship team. He's back this year for Nurse Shell. They beat Ketchum 18-0 last Friday on opening night. And Gary said that there was he didn't think they played as well the first few plays of the game because there's almost a shock that they're playing. And it does feel strange, John. And, on top of that, you're limited number of fans at games. And obviously it's just a different vibe. There's going to be some sloppy play this year, which I don't really know will work itself out before the season is over. It's only 6 weeks long. So, there's definitely a lot of different things going on. And I think there is some strangeness. But, again, as I said before, you do just keep hearing – how happy and how fortunate people feel to be back out there. And I think that's kind of like the overriding theme of the season, whether there are some strange elements to it or not.
So for the kids who aren't out there now, they have the opportunity to showcase their wares at a different time of year, yet it's still out there on the field. It's still competition. They're still putting things on tape, as the kids and football players like to say now. What are the expectations? Are teams going out there expecting that if we're out there, well, let's play for a championship in our league and whatever the rules allow this year, or is it more a matter of right now, let's get out there and it's going to be a great experience and let the chips fall where they may?
I think it's a combination of both, John. I think that there are definitely athletes, juniors and seniors who, like you said, they want to get the experience to have some nice plays to put on tape and try and help them get to college. There are other people that, they keep saying kind of one last ride with my classmates. There's that aspect of it too. And then there are, certainly select teams that, expect to win every game. And, they don't want that to be any different this year. They want to win as much as they can this year, that's important to them. So I definitely think it's a combination of things. I don't want to say it's less competitive than in years past, but I would say that the expectation or the desire of win, the desire to win on the whole is probably not as strong as it would be in a typical year.
Mm-hmm. And one of the schools where I work public address, I know they are concerned. For example, we're going to do things a little different this year as to what we do particular week, senior night, et cetera, because I can tell they are concerned that, hey, you can get a stoppage anytime and the season could be shut down with just one positive test. The impression of how these schools get out there, how they compete, the mindset when they're out there, is there a shift in the balance of power, maybe because of this, or maybe because certain teams may have opted out or might opt out?
I don't know. It's hard to really say. It's honestly, it's hard to even judge the teams. Even the basketball season, which was just played, when there's no crossovers, no games, between different schools, it's really even hard to say who's good. I mean, who's good. The teams that win are good, right? But you don't know who the best teams are. And I think that's kind of going to be the way it is this fall 2 season also. It's hard to kind of see any kind of shifts or where I shouldn't say it. You can see the shifts, but are they real? Are they something that's that you'd kind of would hold up in a normal year? We have, all the time there's a team that goes into the playoffs and they're 7-0 and they look great. And then maybe they lose in the first or second round. And, things kind of revert to normal, I think, in the postseason when, the cream kind of rises to the top. And, I think that this year you won't maybe have some of those games that determine that. And that's fine. I think that, like I said, this year it's more about having the ability to compete than actually the competitions themselves and who wins and who loses.
Mm-hmm. How about, have you heard anything from coaches or from athletic departments, athletic directors with the football season now? If things go according to plan, we will have a football season in the fall. Again, we hope for returning juniors, sophomores, freshmen who will be year advanced when they come back in the fall. Are coaches or athletic departments feeling like football's a tough sport, the body gets banged up, guys get hurt, players play hurt to some extent throughout the football season in most instances for most players? Might it be too much football physically on the body back-to-back in spring and then again in the autumn?
Again, John, I think that people that worry about that with teenagers. I think the teenagers themselves would kind of laugh at that. I just don't think that they think that it's that dangerous. And, look, they're going to end up ending, late April. They're going to have a couple months off. They'll be back on the field, many of them, in the beginning of June. When I say a couple months off, it might not even be that long. There's going to be a very quick transition from this season into what's considered the off season. And, generally in June in particular and parts of July, there are teams that take that time of the year very seriously to develop their teams, 7-on-7 passing scrimmages,
right.
Tournaments, team camps.
Some football camps like at Mamaroneck where they bring a whole bunch of teams, and I go there every year to that camp.
Right. And they bring in, they maybe have 3 days of a camp and then 2 days of scrimmaging at the end of the week. That's a big part of the development. Well, I think that certain schools, well, really all schools, but certain schools in particular, they're going to look at these 6 weeks that we have right now almost as an extension of that, because you're getting a chance to see the younger players play. And then you're, 4, 5, 6 weeks later, you're going to have the chance to talk about what happened and to kind of reevaluate your team. Obviously, the seniors won't be there, but it's definitely going to be a season that really leads into the 2021 offseason.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's shift for just a moment to Iona college basketball. The Gaels had 3 shutdowns during the year due to
4, John. 4.
4.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I lost count, I guess, somewhere.
Yeah, right.
And the coach, Rick Pitino, of course, making his return to college basketball. He had COVID at one point too, correct?
Yeah, he did. Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But he recovered well. The team recovered well. I was impressed how Iona made their way through the season like this. They got in just enough games to qualify for the MAC tournament. They won the MAC championship again, off to the NCAAs, and an impressive first-round bow out, as it turned out, to a number 2 seed, Alabama. But I think we have to give Coach Pitino, his staff, and the entire program at Iona top kudos for the way they conducted themselves through the season and for all they were able to accomplish, too.
No doubt. I mean, I kind of fall on a little bit of a different side of it than most people, in the sense that I wasn't shocked that they won the MAC tournament, because I think that them, and maybe with the exception of Siena, were the best teams. I mean, the number 2 seed was Monmouth, John. They played Monmouth twice and they beat them twice. They swept back to back after a long, after a layoff. So I had thought going into the tournament that they could certainly win. Obviously, winning 4 games in 5 days is not easy. And their issue was Isaiah Ross coming off COVID himself. The last shutdown, he's their best player. And then the fact that he and Asante Gist in particular and Barrett John Louis, their backcourt, logs a lot of minutes. So, that's a lot of minutes for those 3 guys in particular to have to play in a 5-day span. But they did it. They were able to win. And again, like you said, they played really impressively against Alabama. I got to see a lot of that game, obviously, and Ross was spectacular. Gist did his thing, kind of kept them in it. Nelly Jr. Joseph had some moments. He's got a really bright future ahead. It was just the depth of the team that they were going to face a point in that game where they were starting to get worn down. And I think they would have had to win that game. They would have had to be in the position they were in, and then maybe get some luck over the last few minutes of the game to win out. It didn't happen, but I think that's a great place to kind of build from for Rick Pitino. And you heard him after the game. He is not a moral victory guy. This is not somebody that is a lot of times after games happy. They beat Hofstra earlier in the year, which is a great win for them. And he made it seem like it was just another win. It wasn't that big a deal. Hofstra wasn't that great. Well, Hofstra just made the NCAA tournament, qualified for the NCAA tournament the year before, out of the Colonial Athletics Association, which is a much better conference than the MAC. So, this is a really good win. They played pretty well opening night against Seton Hall, and these were things that didn't impress him. So he's not a moral victory guy, but you could see that he was excited after what happened this postseason about the future of the program. 2 building blocks, Nelly Jr. Joseph and Osborne Shema, they're 2 big men. Barrett John Louis will be back next year. He's a really key guy for them on the wing. He's a great defender. He's a terrific athlete. He didn't even progress this year as a shooter. Their key is going to be kind of developing a backcourt. They look pretty good up front. It's going to be replacing Asante Gist and Isaiah Ross if they don't come back for the 5th year, which I don't expect them to. It'll be kind of replacing the ball handling, the playmaking, and the scoring. And I know Pitino wants to push the push the tempo in future seasons and, playing defense fast and playing up and down. That's kind of his style of play from over the years at Kentucky and Louisville. And he wants to get back to that. And so it's going to be adding players, whether it's true freshmen or whether it's transfers. And this year there will be a ton of people on the transfer market. So Iona will have some opportunities there, but it'll be adding people who can kind of help them push the pace and frankly, John, score the ball, because we saw Gist and Ross were about the only people they had who could score. And if they're gone, you're going to see some development from the younger players, but they're going to need some more scoring. So there are definitely some places to address on the roster, but I think that you could tell in Pitino's what he said after the game, that he was excited about the opportunity that they had and the ability they had to kind of add to this roster and make this be the type of team he expects it to be over the year. They have a big schedule already planned next year, non-conference. So, I know that he'll be ready to go jumping into the offseason.
Rick Pitino, used to winning national championships. He's the basketball version of Tom Brady after the NFC Championship game when Tampa Bay beat Green Bay and Brady walked into the locker room. One of his Tampa Bay Bucks teammates was crying, and Brady walked over to him and said, "What are you crying about? We didn't finish the job yet." And that's the mentality, I think, why these guys win the way they do.
Right. John, and they have some nice pieces on the roster, but I keep saying to people, he is going to want to, yes, he's going to develop some of the young guys. He's also going to want to bring in people to compete with them or maybe even play over them, because he looks at the team this year. He didn't think the team this year was very good. They made the NCAA tournament. They won the MAC conference postseason tournament, and yet he doesn't think they're very good. So he's trying to reach a much higher standard than just winning the MAC tournament and getting into the NCAAs. He's trying to reach a much higher bar, and obviously he knows what it takes to get there and the type of players and the type of talent you need, and he's going to definitely pursue that, when it comes to recruiting players this offseason.
Your NCAA Final Four.
Well, John, I had Illinois to win it all, so that's pretty much out the window.
Virginia to be in the Final Four. So
right, that's pretty much out the window. So I don't even know what to think anymore. I also thought that Michigan was a possibility, but I think with what's happened to Ohio State and Illinois and Purdue, you have to question what's going on with the Big Ten, how strong it was.
Right. They were ranked in the Final Four too.
John, we talk about the crossovers. They were ranked the highest rated conference in the country this year,
right? And
they had 9 teams make the big dance. But obviously, maybe there was something kind of lost in the translation with the lack of non-conference games because they've had a tough tournament. So right now everybody loves Gonzaga. I haven't seen enough of them probably to have that strong of an opinion. But it looks like right now Gonzaga is the best team in the country. When you have Illinois and Ohio State getting knocked off, you get to the point where there aren't that many 1 or 2 seeds left that Gonzaga has to compete against. I know Baylor has a lot of talent too, some NBA talent on that roster too. So they'd probably be, I think, number 2 right now, probably after.
Mm-hmm. I have them 1 and 2 as well. Gonzaga to beat Baylor in the national championship game. In past years, a number of past seasons, Gonzaga, a lot of people said, Bulldogs are going all the way. And I say, no, not this year. Now, I say this year for Gonzaga, I've seen enough of them, I think, to feel confident that they can go all the way. And if the Zags don't win it all this year, well, head coach Mark Few may never win a national championship.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
I think this year a bust for Gonzaga. So, Josh Thompson, thank you for the insight, as always, here on the Sports Report here on Westchester Talk Radio. We'll talk again, hopefully, at the beginning of the spring, the actual spring sports season, which begins May 1st, correct?
Yeah, we practice April 19th, and then I think May 1st is the first day you can play games.
Of competition, yep. And we have our Fall 2 season now, which ends on April 30th on the field, correct?
Yeah, around that weekend.
Right.
That weekend there, yep.
By Entergy, the Indian Point Energy Center, supporting our communities right through the spring of 2021. By Wartburg Healthcare and Rehabilitation in Mount Vernon, Park Sterling Realty in Bronxville, and Michael Labriola Landscape Design and Construction in Armonk, and catch all of our Westchester, Rockland, Putnam, Dutchess, Orange, and Fairfield County Talk Radio programming on our YouTube channel, Sharc Creative, YouTube.